There we go. Awesome. This morning, I'm not going to talk to you about blockchain, cryptocurrency, NFTs, LLMs, or AI. So then why the hell are we here? Because I want to sort of pose an unorthodox idea. This idea that technology changes everything, and yet at the same time, technology changes nothing. Anthony took us back to the 1950s, the birth of the first ATM. And I want to take us back a little bit earlier. I want to take us back to a FinTech revolution that changed the planet. I want to take us back 5,500 years. Does everyone remember the year 3,500 BC? I'm sure you all remember that. So I'm going to take us to a place now known as modern-day Iraq. And the reason why we want to come here is because this is a period where there's a huge FinTech revolution, it just wasn't called FinTech. It was a time where technology changed everything, and the ripples that we see today started here 5,500 years ago, in a place called Mesopotamia. Most of you probably do not know much about Mesopotamia, so let me take you on a quick history lesson. Mesopotamia is in now what we call modern-day Iraq, and it was coined the cradle of civilization. And there are really critical things that we can take away from this period, because there are two FinTech innovations that I want to introduce to you today that actually will help us understand how technology will change the future in today's era. Because I would argue that the changes that happened 5,500 years ago were probably more innovative than the ones we see today. And so there are probably some interesting lessons that we can take away as we think about the future. So are you guys ready for the first breakthrough FinTech innovation? Okay, that was a very unexpected, lackluster response. So this is, if you may not know, is a block. It's actually an old stone tablet. And most of you are probably not super excited by this, but it's actually the form of the first accounting. And I don't know if any of you are accountants here. Any accountants? Okay, no, that's why they're not here. But actually, let me kind of take you through the problem. At the time, Mesopotamia had a lot of clay and wheat, but they lacked precious metals. And if any of you have played the board game Settlers of Catan, the first thing you need to do is if you have one commodity but you lack another, is you trade. And so Mesopotamia at the time started to engage in trading with local neighbors. They would offer grains, they would offer clay, and in return get precious metals. Sounds simple. But as that trade began to explode, you had a really simple problem. Who the hell do I owe, and who owes me? Really simple problem, and there was actually no way of keeping track of it. And so someone was like, I've got an idea. We have this thing called stone tablets. What if we could use this to track who owes me and who I owe? And it was the introduction of the first ledger. But it was revolutionary because what it allowed was an explosion of complex trades where you could trade with multiple partners at the same time, you could keep track of it, and you had a way to sort of centralize it and store it in a single place. But not only was it the change of trade that this unlocked, but actually the ripple effects that this created. Because as a result, what happened as the trade exploded, roads were built. The modern-day infrastructure of roads, domestication of animals to get your goods from one city to another began to explode as well. The ripple effects of technology go beyond FinTech. The introduction of the stone tablet revolutionized modern-day infrastructure. We take for granted transportation today, and yet it started with a simple invention, a stone tablet. The problem was you now had a system of record, but you had no way of sort of consolidating that. So, for example, Anthony owes me 100 sheep. I owe him a ton of wheat. How do we reconcile that? Well, actually, what you need is a standard unit of measurement. And at the time, precious materials was used as the common unit of measurement. The problem is that how do you sort of reconcile all that? And so at the time, by decree, they decided barley and silver would be the mechanism or the common unit of measurement used in this day and age as a way to denote any type of good. So for example, the shirt you have, that's 10 kilos of wheat, or 10 kilos of barley, sorry. And you had now a common unit of measurement. But the problem you had, though, was that barley was actually very, very hard to move. It's a perishable good. And so you're using a common unit of measurement that is perishable, hard to store, and hard to move. And silver was actually incredibly rare. And so what you had was this issue where you couldn't actually use these unit measurements. And so what happened in practice was I would turn up with my 10 sheep and say, look, you don't have 10 sheep to give me. Let's agree that I owe you 1 block of silver, 1 kite of silver. And actually, it was the first form of a trust-based unit of measurement. Well, I just trusted that this idea that, hey, I trust you that you'll pay me back in an equivalent unit of measurement. And it actually defined the first idea of credit. And let me explain why. Because actually, contrary to common belief, bartering was not the first introduction of financial services. It's actually not true. If you look through historical records, bartering did not exist. What actually exists, because the probability where I had a good that you wanted and that you had a good that I wanted at the exact same time was very unlikely. What happened was actually more a form of an IOU system denoted in a common unit of measurement. It was actually the first form of credit history. And so actually what happened before unit of measurements was actually a first form of credit. And what it did was start to establish a relationship with money that went beyond just trading, but actually a relationship with money that became around a trust-based unit, a trust-based system, a common unit of measurement, and a credit-based system as well, that today has created the foundations of financial services for today. And so you might think, Tim, this is slightly interesting facts. We're at an Innovators conference. Why are you teaching me about historical records from Mesopotamia from the year 3500 BC? Well, I think there are 2 implications. Implication 1 is that FinTech has ripple effects beyond the realm of financial services. I think most people, I would say, think about FinTech and financial services too narrowly. They think about it in the realm of the financial service industry. But in reality, what you saw here was the ripple effects that changed society from the ground up. The establishment of marketplaces and e-commerce, the establishment of trade routes, the establishment of roads, the establishment of domestication. But not only that, the gathering of people and ideas and culture. The reason why Mesopotamia was the cradle of civilization was not just because of the trade, but because the trade brought the movement of people, which then brought the movement of ideas, which then brought the movement of culture. And so if you want to understand the future of FinTech, think about the ripple effects. Think about the edges. The second observation I made when I went back to history was that fundamentally, money is pointless. And actually, it's about the relationship we have with it and what it allows us to do that's more important. And so for me, the implications of today is very interesting because you go to many of these conferences, and quite frankly, everyone has spent far too much time in the financial service industry, and so all they talk about is the technology. They talk about the money, they talk about how do we help people invest, save, manage, track their money, and you end up with a bunch of products that look like this, centered around the money experience. How do we help customers manage their money with more graphs, more data, more information, more decision making, put the tools in the consumer's hand to help them make better money decisions? And I would argue that is a complete waste of time. We've actually missed the point because actually, what is the point of money? Money is a tool that allows you to do something else. Clayton Christensen once said, you don't buy a drill, you buy a hole in the wall. You don't get a mortgage, you buy a home. You actually buy security and safety for your family. And so what we said when we started Yonder was like, what if we changed this concept and went the other direction and said, what if we centered everything about what could money do for you? Because the greatest experiences in life are never about the money. They're about the experiences, the people you have these experiences with. What if we could center everything around what you could do with your money rather than centering it around helping you manage your money better? Because actually in life, the greatest things in life are never about the money itself. What if we could operate at the intersection in the same way Mesopotamia did, where temples would be the center and cornerstones for the meeting of money, commodity trading, people, and ideas? And what if Yonder could be at the intersection of people, experiences, and their money? And so at the very start of this presentation, I said this statement: technology changes everything, and yet technology changes nothing. And that if you want to understand the future of FinTech, you need to start by understanding the past. The past that tells us that it was never about the money in the first place. The past that tells us that when there is a FinTech revolution, there are ripple effects that go far beyond the walls of financial services, but into the fabric of society. I lived in Kenya actually for a year and actually worked and sat with the founders of M-Pesa and saw this in the tiniest villages of Kenya. I lived there and I went to these villages and I asked people, I said, hey, why do you like M-Pesa? And they're like, well, actually, it means I can start to sell goods. It means I can move money around. It means I can work and go from the village to the city and work and send money back to my family. It was never about the money. It was about what it allowed them to do. And so I'm typically not the person to make bold prediction because I'm often wrong, but I will make one today anyway, and you can all tell me I was probably wrong about it. But I think that these constructs of what we see today, of a current account, a personal loan, a car finance, a credit card, a mortgage, are actually built around the way banks run their P&L. But if you go back to what fundamentally money is, I think that in the future, these products will no longer exist. And instead, you will see FinTech, financial products, financial services, weaved through the fabric of society. The same way when you go onto Facebook or Instagram, you don't think about TCP/IP, which is the underlying technology that powers the internet. It just works. And I think in the future FinTech will be so invisible that it just works, and no one will ever talk about it ever again. Thank you so much.